third session today is leveraging and measuring location-based marketing. So we've gone from measuring the effectiveness to targeting, and now we're getting very precise. This is our moderator, I believe, and it's Rob Griffin, head of digital from Havas.
Yes, thank you.
My pleasure.
Morning, everybody. How we doing? We alive? Well, I think we got about a third of the room that we had yesterday, so we'll see how this goes. But we only have you for 24 minutes, so it can't be too painful. I'm going to let each of the panelists introduce themselves when they get up for their short presentations. I think the key thing for me is for you guys to sort of take away and sort of listen about this is that, mobile's not a media channel. It's a consumer access point. And location really provides us the opportunity to enhance experiences, whether it be a retail experience like we were talking about earlier, a hotel experience, whatever the case may be. If you think about how you use mobile in that capacity, to me, I think that's one of the big takeaways. And so this topic for me is very exciting because I think what's coming on now with smartphones and beacons and location and all this different stuff that we can do now and the tracking we can do, there's really an opportunity to give the consumer something in exchange for them to give you some data back that you can then sort of use to then give them a better experience. So I'm not sure which of you guys are up first. Lauren, up first.
Howdy, welcome. Good morning. All right. See, I wore orange because I knew everybody would need a little bit of a wake up, yeah. And I need that. Thank you. All right. Whoops, already doing it wrong. All right, we talked about the power of data, right? This is the story about location data and the power of location data, specifically phi and lambda, lat, long, right? So you see this journey, and we do this every day, right? Physical and digital. So phygital, our movements across are important. I'm getting digital behaviors, I'm getting physical patterns, and I'm using this information to create audiences, insights, and measurement. And it's awesome, right? So you've got first party, you've got location, you've got CRM. These combined data are used as seed sets to create audiences. And at Dstillery, we like to play around with everything that we can get our hands on. And we build these audience models for our marketers, sometimes hundreds for each marketer. And we score this information every day dynamically because behaviors change, right? People visit different store locations. They visit different sites. They might go down into a shopping cart, or they might just peruse do a quick bounce. But we're capturing that information, and we're using it to create the audiences, reach them on cross-channel in our own technology, programmatically, optimize algorithmically, and then start all over again. And what's great about it is I get to play with all that data. And specifically, our friends phi and lambda, right? Anybody tell me where this is? It's San Sebastian. It's actually Maria Cristina, because I didn't realize we were going to be in the Victoria Theater, but yes. But it's more than that. It's more than retargeting, right? Yeah, you can target me here, or if I'm here, say, oh, you're going to be in Spain, you're going to be in San Sebastian, and I'm going to target you for a Pinchos. Well, it's more than that, right? What is it? You can take these 40 billion daily events that we get, you can take all those that have location in them, and you can put that location in context, right? And I'm going to talk about the US because we're primarily US. We do some UK and some Canada, but it's still English speaking, so it doesn't really matter. Right now we have 650,000 places that we've put in context. And so what that means is that we're taking behavior and we're understanding where consumers have gone based off of their location, whether it is at San Sebastian, at the ICOM, or whether it's at Burning Man, or maybe they visit their favorite store. Now, it's important if you're going to use this information that you use the right location data, right? So I might get 80% of my mobile impressions coming in with location, but guess what? Most of it is not worthwhile using. And you don't want to use bad location data in your models or in your insights. So we have a few algorithms that we use to go through and figure out which ones are moving too fast, or which one is in the middle of Antarctica, and we get rid of that stuff. So we get rid of about 60% of our location data that's coming through and don't use it. Well, once you get it, what do you have? You have the ability to understand where people went, so behavior. So in this case, it's brand X in San Francisco, and these circles are representative of where people have gone for this particular brand. Now, I can use that information to build location models. And if I do that, I can then take that information and I can also start doing cross-device audience, right? So you put the location in context, I identify the cross-devices for that person, for that user. I then can do cross-channel campaigns, cross-channel measurement. So, whoops, whoa, didn't mean to do that. All right, what's this look like? So in this case, you can see we've got different brands. So we've put location in context. We've measured the amount of people who have gone to these particular brands. And in the red, you see that's the mobile audience, right? So those are the number of devices that we've seen that have gone to those brands across the US. What we do then is we crosswalk with our algorithm to desktop. And you can see that in the gray. So I've just found that mobile audience that was the seed set of mobile location data, found them on desktop, and now I have a bigger audience. But I can then scale it using our prospect audience engines that uses all the other data to find new prospects for the marketer. So you just see I've used location in a way to do cross-channel. But we need to measure, right? So it's great. I can reach audiences cross-channel, but I need to measure. I can do it with location. Mobile measurement itself is difficult, but using location to provide information about online to offline is key. And I'm going to show you a quick case study that we did with Placed. And why is it key? Because 9 out of 10 digital purchases actually happen in-store. So, in this case, we are looking at a desktop campaign that we measured with Placed. Placed was here last year, David Shim. He was part of the Data Venture Challenge. It's a 500,000-person panel with 200 million locations coming through. And you use this information to be able to measure the return on a particular campaign. Now, if you look at this quickly, you see, wow, that's a really huge return on ad spend. But if we put it in context and we actually measure the lift using the panel information, we can provide the return on our campaign for sales in store. But wait, there's more. Location, Phi Lambda, it's awesome. How about traditional? Out-of-home, radio. If we look at this bus stop, and they're advertising there, put it in context, measure the devices around it, crosswalk to behavior, I can basically tell you what these people are interested in. And no surprise, this is Irvine, California, it could be San Sebastian, because guess what? They're interested in surfing. And you can then show the propensity of the people who are looking at the surfing behavior, or those that exhibited surfing behavior, and you see in the red, that's Huntington Beach. That's where most people are looking online for the surfing sites. You could do the same, that should have been San Sebastian. And that's just a taste of the power of Phi and Lambda. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Lauren. Well, maybe give it to Duncan. But Lauren, before we let Duncan just sort of jump in, and like I said, I'll let him introduce himself here. A question for you. It sounds like what you're really driving at here is sort of starting to decipher between intent and actual behavior. How do some of those algorithms work? I don't know about the rest of you, but you targeted me in San Sebastian, but I had no intent to get drunk last night, and I did, right? So how do you begin to leverage that data for some of that insight? Because I think that's really important for brands and retailers.
That would have helped. Like, I would have had your historical data and known that you would have gotten drunk, So, and you would have known that.
I have no
I'm
pattern of that. I
speaking,
don't know what you're talking about.
No, it's a good question. I mean, in terms of the last one, basically we use for intent and for media planning, particularly in traditional space. It's combining the data signals from the physical and the digital, and it could be app behavior, it could be site behavior, but it allows us to tell a much bigger story than just using location for retargeting. So,
great, thank you. Duncan?
Great. Thanks, Lauren. Thanks, Rob. So my name is Duncan McCall. I'm with a company called PlaceIQ. And what I'm going to talk about here today is you've heard about this idea of using mobile as a way to understand visitation to a location, right? The idea of mobile as a new mechanism for attribution in the real world, very exciting. We've actually extended that out to television, linear television. So what I'm going to talk about here is give you sort of some context and background around a case study we did, actually measuring the effectiveness of television advertising, linear television advertising, to actually drive people into a physical store. So first thing to talk about, a slide with a bunch of numbers. And the point of this slide is to say, look, when you take this idea of the hyper-connected smartphone always on that we've heard about repeatedly, and you combine that with location, you get to some big numbers really quickly. So think for us, it's a trillion location-aware data points in our system. Across 1 billion tiles, we now see about 10 billion movement data points, opted-in movement data points from around about 100 million devices per day. So this isn't a panel, this is huge observed data, really, really compelling stuff. So now you think about this idea of, okay, visitation in the world. I was here last year talking about this thing that we launched about 3 years ago, first to market a mechanism called place visit rate. The ability to say, look, we show people an advertisement on a mobile device, and then we're able to measure how many of those devices that were exposed to an advertisement ended up physically going to the polygon outline of a large footprint location. And that's worked very well, and it's almost become an industry standard now. But then we asked ourselves, well, what about if you could connect those mobile devices to television? You could now measure television's ability, advertising on television, to drive people to a physical store. So that's really the question here is, can we use mobile to measure the effectiveness of linear television advertising? So the first thing is, so how do you do this, right? How do you connect television to mobile? So the way we do this is we actually have a long-standing relationship with Rentrack, and as I'm sure nearly all of you know, Rentrack tens of millions of return path set-top box data. And what we do is we now organize those set-top boxes that, of course, themselves are just location-aware devices. They don't move. That's a great thing. They can be keyed to PII. We organize those by location, down to a very finite location. And now we can say, we understand in the US the home dwells of about 90 million consumers using opted-in, anonymous location data. And we can now, of course, create a connection between set-top boxes and mobile devices. So now you've got this really powerful connection that allows you to extend television, the targeting and measurement elements of this live set-top box to mobile devices. And of course, the really cool thing there is, if you've connected television to mobile, you've connected television to the physical world. And that really is a really interesting paradigm shift. So if you said, okay, great, let's talk, what about something we actually did? So this is a real case study where we worked with a very large retailer, so a large footprint US retailer, as well as a large television network. And you can see 3 groups. So 3 groups here. Group 1, this was a set of households and devices that were not exposed to television advertising for this retailer, and they were not exposed to mobile advertisements. Group 2, set of households and devices that were exposed to television advertising for this particular retailer, no mobile. Group 3, people who were exposed to television and mobile. This was a US campaign, nationwide, very significant budget. And now, of course, we can see, let's look at the actual visitation of those mobile devices, so those consumers anonymously to those particular stores, and look at it by these 3 groups. So the visitation, the percentage of visitation we saw for Group 1, no advertising, was about 0.1%. Group 2, now you're starting to see people who are exposed to television advertising only. I think it was 0.19%. And Group 3, television and mobile, 0.4%. So some really, really compelling results. And now you can start to say, well, we're looking at a 2x and a 4x uplift here. The really interesting thing was this, I got caught with the clicker. It was going to happen at some point. The really interesting thing here was this client then turned around and said, let's segment this differently. Let's look at all of the consumers and devices that already visit our stores and look at the ones that are exposed to television advertising versus not. Completely different way of looking at it. And now, of course, we see same kind of results. So looking at it a completely different way, we've seen the same kind of 4x uplift. So great. We've been able to prove that we can target and we can measure visitation from television, which is compelling. But now think about the analytical opportunities. We can now start to say, where else did these consumers go? What competing stores did they visit? What kind of psychographics and demographics did they have in the physical world? Where did they go dining, recreating? What type of cars do they own? So suddenly there's this wealth of data that can be attached through mobile into television. And you can put a slide up and say, great, look, we had 400% lift here. And I'm not here to tell you that, oh my God, we've invented a way to prove that television advertising works, would be a bold statement. What we can say is we now have a new mechanism to be able to measure the behavioral change of consumers that are exposed to television and mobile. And that, of course, is a really, really exciting sort of shift for us and our clients. And if you think about this, the sort of conclusion here, you've heard this. I don't need to tell you this. You've heard it a bunch of times. Look, mobile is becoming this new connective glue across this new emerging identity graph. But mobile is pretty unique, right? It has some very, very powerful elements to it, one of which you've heard about, which is the fact that it's location aware. So you can suddenly say, we can understand the anonymous movements of these consumers that are key to these mobile devices, but then you can say, well, we can now bridge in third-party data. Not only can we understand behavioral movements in the world, we can connect that back to auto ownership. We can connect it to television. We can connect it to cookies. And then, of course, go one step further, we can now connect this to a CRM system, to a DMP, to an enterprise backend, so I can understand behavior in the world, I can understand television viewership, and I can now understand how does that sort of behave based upon the people who buy my products, who visit my websites. You combine all this together, and now you can build this new understanding of consumers that, you can target, you can measure, you can analyze, you can understand in a completely new way. But of course, the real key here is this new understanding is not just siloed to mobile. It isn't just be able to be put out on mobile, and in fact, it's not just display. You can now start to think about, we're extending this, and we're doing, I think, many, if not all of these, we're extending this new understanding of behavior across mobile, display, out-of-home, print, email, retail site selection, and that, to me, is the really, really compelling conclusion. Mobile can build you this new innovative understanding of consumer behavior. You can measure, you can analyze in completely new ways, but you can set that free across a whole series of mediums, and that, to me, is a really, really exciting promise of the future of mobile. Thanks very much indeed.
So, Duncan, question for you then. Given what you're doing and how you're trying to help companies and brands sort of extend that experience, given all this extra data you have coming from that mobile and it's sort of acting as the remote control of my life, how do you help them decipher what data matters? Like, what data do you use?
Yeah, that's the real key, right? So the idea of just throwing data over to a brand or an agency becomes very problematic. It's the application of that data that's the key. So we've actually, ourselves, we built a whole series of vertical sort of specialist applications. You think of retail, you think of automotive, casual dining, and travel. So I think for me, it's the ability of, it comes back to the cliche, but it's totally true. With this new sort of behavioral data, just using it to target or drive clicks is one thing, but using it to solve real business problems and working with agencies and clients and saying, what are your true business objectives here? How are you trying to conquest? What kind of people? How are you trying to retain? What patterns are you trying to understand? That's when the magic happens for us, when we get a specific set of business problems to really, really solve.
Great. Lauren, question for you. For a brand, how much to make this happen has to be app-focused, or can it just be the mobile web?
It doesn't matter what it is, right? So essentially what we're doing is, if we're working with a brand, we're going to find out whether they want to target their customers or conquest. That happens a lot, right? We'll put that into our system, and we'll use that as a seed set to reach across. So it could be mobile web, it could be app. I mean, most of the impressions that we see on programmatic are in-app, right? Mm-hmm. So doing a mobile web campaign is a little bit harder in terms of reach, but it is also where a lot of people are going in terms of the engagement in the video. So.
Awesome. Now, we got about 2 minutes left. I don't know if you guys, what your sort of parting thoughts would be for the audience, and you can sort of go in order, or maybe Duncan, you go first, where Lauren was just speaking, but sort of parting thoughts for the audience in terms of what's the really way to think about leveraging location and mobile to enhance that experience, and what does that mean for either the brands in the room or the agencies that are working with some brands?
Yeah, I would say, you think of this idea of location, location traditionally was thought of its proximity and its geofencing, and it's being traditionally used as a bit of a blunt instrument. Often as, hey, I want to target people near here, I want to target people with these types of behaviors. And location ultimately is just going to become a horizontal enabler. I actually don't think location is a category. It just becomes a horizontal enabler, and it becomes essentially a new data point to be able to feed in. Think of your DMP, right? A lot of people talking about DMPs here. You think about, I've got an auto intender and a DMP, and an auto intender might be people who've been to automotive websites. It might be people who are in market, that IHS or Polk says. And then you've got this new level of behavior, which is people who have visited an automotive dealership. And those are different. There are different signals. So I think location becomes this horizontal input. And as you sort of alluded to that question earlier, it's not then used as I just want to target. It's used as a new way to understand consumers, a new way to understand behavior that can then be applied across a whole series of different applications, from CRM to email to site selection. That, to me, is the really exciting thing about this.
Lauren?
If you're not using location, you should be, and work with providers who are making sure that they're using accurate location. I mean, Dstillery works across the board with all third parties. Elise presented yesterday, worked with MapQuest. We have worked with Duncan, worked with Place. There's others in the business who are approaching this in the right way. And the idea is to understand what kind of intelligence can you get from the location. And it's not just from putting it in context. It's marrying it across the board with other data and solving problems that we've had all along and not been able to do anything about except for maybe through surveys. Now we're actually getting quantitative behavioral clickstream and data that allows us to tell a bigger story. Keep that in mind.
Well, there we go. Well, thank you both, Duncan, Lauren. We're out of time, I see, on the clock. So I think we're holding you guys up from coffee, which is probably needed at the moment. So thank to both of you. That was amazing and insightful. Thank you.